A friend of mine recently sent me a video from Dave Ramsey and asked me some questions about it. They were wondering, is Dave crap or are IULs crap? And today we're going to talk all about it. We're going to go through what Dave believes the IUL is and why he believes they're crap. And I'm going to give my opinion on it and some facts so that you can make your own decision. If you're new to the channel, my name is Mckensy Long. I've been a financial professional for the last decade. And one of the things that bugs me the most is misinformation on the internet. I know it's a big job to have to deal with, but especially when it comes to financial products and understanding the financial industry. And I want to start off by saying I am actually a Dave Ramsey fan. And in fact, I started my financial journey because of Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover. I purchased the book, I started following it, I actually did what it said to do. Surprisingly, it worked. It's not that surprising, it's math. Along with a couple other books. I was also reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Think and Grow Rich, but the main one that helped me get my financial life in order was Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover. So before we get into it and you think that I have an issue with Dave, I do not. I am so thankful for him that over 10 years ago, I read his book, I put it into action, and it worked for me. And at that point in my life, I was Dave Ramsey's target market. I was lower middle income, I had a bunch of debt, I didn't really know what I was doing with my money, I was financially illiterate, and I was working a normal job, making a normal amount of money, but I had no idea what I was doing. And that is Dave's exact market. So if you understand what he's saying and why he's saying it, it gives you a better perspective and understanding that people speak to a particular audience, I think will help you to understand and navigate the waters of financial literacy when you understand some of the things that are behind the scenes. And as far as Dave Ramsey goes with his debt stuff, I absolutely love it. I still today teach a lot of that stuff to my clients, the debt snowball, all of those kinds of things. I think those are great. In fact, the whole process is great. But what happened was after doing those things and I started becoming more financially literate, I started coming into the financial industry, I started hanging out with wealthy people, there was a discrimination that started happening. There was a difference between what Dave Ramsey was talking about and what all these wealthy people that I was now spending time with and learning from were actually doing. And this was tough for me because I didn't quite understand what Dave was talking about because that had worked for me, and why it was so different from what had worked for so many other people. Now, am I saying that Dave's advice is wrong? No, absolutely it's not. You can still become wealthy that way, and that's kind of the cool thing about wealth, is you can become wealthy in a bunch of different ways. However, I think it's important to understand the pros and cons of everything. And unfortunately, Dave Ramsey advice kind of just gets taken as all pros and no cons, but everything, including the IUL, has pros and cons. And where the messages really started to diverge from Dave Ramsey was the understanding of what's going to happen into the future and the ticking time bomb that Dave Ramsey never seems to address of what's going to happen with taxes. And one of the ways that you can find this out is understanding where he says to allocate your funds. Let's go ahead and watch this.
Obviously, we're going to do 15% of $100,000 or $15,000 is how we've got to allocate it. And our formula is pretty simple. It's kind of like rock, paper, scissors, except you can only win one way. And so it's match beats Roth beats traditional. So let's allocate the 15,000 down that list until we do whatever.
So as you can tell, Dave Ramsey's first step is starting to your contributions towards your 401k if they have a match. And of course, that all makes sense. I'm good with that. Step number 2 is going to be contributing into your Roth. That's great as well. Where it actually starts to change, or where it becomes a little bit different with what the wealthy do, is step number 3. He says your funds should start going back into your 401k, 403b, or TSP. Now, the challenge with this, again, that he never seems to address is what's going to happen to those dollars in retirement. He also doesn't address what happens if you're a business owner and high net worth. Well, you then usually don't have access to a 401k or might not make sense to contribute to your companies. And if you're making over $150,000 a year as an individual or $250,000 as a couple, you no longer have access to a Roth IRA. So what do you do in that case? And when you start to understand the demographic that Dave Ramsey is talking to, you understand why he's specifically talking about these things. Meaning that Dave Ramsey's advice is not for the financially literate. It is not for those who are educated about money. It's not for those who are making good money and entrepreneurs or business owners. Because somebody who is financially literate wants to know what's going to happen and they want to avoid any landmines that they're going to come across, even if it's into the future, especially when it comes to taxes. But again, this doesn't seem to be a big issue to Dave Ramsey. This creates some major issues that we will talk about here in a minute. And if you want to learn more about how to have a tax-free retirement and why it's so important, there are plenty of books out there about it. One of them is going to be this book, Power of Zero by Brian McKnight, David McKnight. He also wrote another book, The Volatility Shield, which is fantastic as well. And then you can also read Tax-Free Retirement by Patrick Kelly. I recommend all three of these. They are very, very good for understanding what is going to happen in the future when it comes to taxes. Now, the omission of this information or not understanding it is going to cost you into the future, because we're talking about coming into a rising tax era, right? If we look at what's going on in the government and how much debt we have, we really only have two solutions. One of them is the government needs to stop spending. And two, we're going to have to raise taxes. Or three, potentially we do a combination of the first two. But either way, I think almost everybody agrees that we're going to have to raise taxes into the future. So what that means is you're saving on dollars now at a very low tax rate to then have to pay taxes into the future at a much higher tax rate when you need the money the most. This isn't just about the taxes that you're going to pay. There's also a compounding effect of what happens with Social Security. Because you're drawing income from your tax deferred account, it looks like actual income. The government doesn't really care whether you're physically working or you're pulling money from your 401k, your 403b, or your TSP, meaning the way that that money gets taxed is as if you're working, which means it's going to penalize how much you're paying or how much taxes you also therefore have to pay on your Social Security benefits. So it penalizes you twice, but Dave Ramsey never seems to talk about this. And what it means for you is 10 to 12 years less in retirement, meaning you're going to run out of money 10 to 12 years faster. And apparently, according to Dave Ramsey, that's better than learning how a cash value life insurance policy works. That just doesn't make sense to me. So I hope Dave Ramsey gets a couple of copies of these books and decides to read them. But until that happens, unfortunately, we're going to have to talk about it here and kind of discuss why somebody might want to use a life insurance with cash value as a supplement for their retirement. Now, are there pros and cons to everything? Absolutely. Is this a perfect product? No. Should it be the only thing that you have in your arsenal? Absolutely not. Should it be the gold standard, the one thing that you're going to idolize and hope that gets you there? No, but obviously understanding having multiple levers that you can pull from, multiple streams of income, helps your options when you are in retirement, which means you have the ability to adjust and adapt depending on what the government decides to do and what your financial situation looks like, meaning you have the ability to pay less in taxes and still receive the amount of income that you need, which allows you to actually keep income or coming in for a longer period of time, which is tremendously important. And again, this is especially true if you're in a higher net worth bracket or you have more income coming in, again, above $150,000 a year approximately as an individual and $250,000 a year approximately as a married couple, because then you lose your access to a Roth IRA. And so one of the major ways that people in that demographic look for to be able to have a tax-free retirement is going to be an IUL, or what David McKnight refers to as a LIRP, a life insurance retirement plan. And the reason why this is important is because it covers a bunch of those areas that we would have holes in if we were just following Dave Ramsey's advice. And unfortunately, because Dave Ramsey and his co-host in this particular video that we're going to watch,
Indexed universal policy is it's a newer version of an old bad idea.
they don't really understand the difference between the different types of permanent life insurance policies. And you will hear him constantly bounce back and forth between whole life, universal life, indexed universal life, but the way that these operate are very, very different, and to lump them all into one is very, very dangerous. And it's more than dangerous, I think it's misleading. And in this clip, even the small part that we're going to play, you will hear Dave constantly go back from whole life insurance to universal life to IUL. He lumps them all in together. And the challenge with that is not only is it a misunderstanding of the products, but he's lumping the negative things about them in together and they don't even relate. So it just shows that he is completely unaware and uneducated about IULs and permanent life insurance policies. Now, let me give you a brief breakdown of why this is important and what it would sound like. And I don't know if you're a car person, but I'm going to keep it very general. Remember, I have an engineering background. So if we were talking about motorcycles, cars, and buses, they're all vehicles. It would kind of be like me referring to all three of them interchangeably. And what if I said, well, you are outside in the weather in this one, and this one doesn't hold very many people, and this one gets terrible gas. Well, that's true in each one of those particular categories, but what if I take those three statements now and apply that to the motorcycle? It's always outside, it doesn't carry very many people, and it gets terrible gas mileage. Well, now that last one's not true. What if I apply those three to the car? Well, you're always outside. Well, no, that's not true. It doesn't hold very many people. That's true. And it gets terrible gas mileage. Well, that's not true. And then when we talk about the bus, you understand what I'm saying. You're not always outside in the weather. It holds plenty of people. And you're right, it doesn't get terrible gas mileage. So you can take a negative from each one of those things, but when you apply them together and use them universally over all three of those products, it's just simply inaccurate. It doesn't mean that he's lying, he's just taking facts about each one and applying them all together, kind of like we talked about with the vehicles. And if you understand, again, Dave Ramsey's demographic, well, of course, if you're in debt, you're not making very much money, you're struggling to pay your bills, you don't have any kind of financial plan, you don't know what you're doing, you're financially illiterate, you probably shouldn't be putting hundreds of dollars a month into an IUL. I would also say you probably shouldn't be putting hundreds of dollars a month into purchasing a home either if you're that financially literate and you don't know what's going on. So I agree with Dave on that, but where that starts to separate is when we start talking to people who are financially literate and who actually have some money. So let's go into a couple more videos of what Dave talks about, and we'll see how he starts off with some facts and how he starts to diverge from that into something that's completely outside of his territory and completely inaccurate. So let's see what Dave Ramsey's points are against the IUL. Let's go ahead and play this first clip.
What you're going to find if you take this product apart and look at the components of it, the insurance portion goes up every year. It's basically what we call an ART, an annual renewable term.
Now, Dave is actually accurate here. Every single life insurance policy, when you boil it down, is an annual renewable term policy, meaning that every single year that somebody gets older, they are going to pay more. That is entirely accurate. But let's go into the next clip where he starts to get a little bit off track.
Index universal goes up every year inside the policy. So if you got a $400 premium, a certain portion, like on your, if you ever look at your mortgage payment, a portion goes to interest, a portion goes to principal. The further you go along, more goes to principal, less goes to interest. This is exactly the opposite. The further you go along, more goes to insurance, less goes, because the ART is going up every year inside there, less is going to your investments. And so if you keep the stupid thing long enough, it will begin to be the point that the premium you're paying will not even cover the insurance cost.
Oof.
And so it starts to eat back into your savings just to keep the policy alive. And the thing gets what we call upside down in the insurance business. And so now you've got a real piece of crap that's eating itself from the inside
out. So here you can see Dave is talking about it almost like the reverse of a mortgage, where basically in the beginning you're putting in all this interest and very little is going to principal, and then at the end it's all principal and a little bit of interest. And he flips that over and says, well, since it's annual renewable term, which is true, and the cost is going to go up over time, it means that you're going to be paying so much into this policy that it's almost like paying all that interest and very little principal.
Oh, here, by the way, after you paid extra on this all these years and you die, they only pay the face value. They don't pay the face value plus your savings that you've been paying extra to build. So it's like a savings account with a crummy rate of return.
They get locked up.
That when you die, they keep your money.
Well, what Dave doesn't seem to understand is that when you do option 1 in an IUL, it means that you're going, as you're putting money into it and you're building the cash value, and this is why it's important to max fund a policy, is that as the cash value starts to grow, you will see that you are paying partially for life insurance and part of it is your cash value. Meaning, if you look at this particular example, for a $500,000 death benefit, let's say around $250,000 of cash value in it, that would mean that you're actually only paying for $250,000 in life insurance. So the cost of life insurance will actually be going down over time because you're paying for less of it as you get older. And as you continue down the road, you might have $400,000 saved into this policy, meaning that you're only paying for $100,000 in life insurance for a total of $500,000, meaning it is your cash value, $400,000, plus $100,000 of life insurance for a total of $500,000. Now this obviously goes against what Dave just said, because he said over time the costs are going to get so expensive that you can then no longer afford the policy and it's going to fall apart. But what he's not understanding is this is actually the perfect buy term and invest the difference in the same policy. Primerica has the same issue with these particular policies. They don't seem to understand that the cost of insurance is actually going down, or the amount of insurance you're purchasing is going down, so your overall cost will be going down over the life of the policy. Because the faster you can pay this down, the less insurance that you're going to be buying. Whereas if you have a 30-year term policy, you might have accumulated the amount of money that you needed by then, but now you no longer need the term policy, but now you have both and you're still paying for it and you may not need it. And what Dave Ramsey and Primerica seem to not understand about these policies, or are unwilling to learn, is that these are literally buy term and invest the difference. It's exactly what you're doing in these policies, except for the faster that you can pay that off, the faster you can build your cash value, the less you're going to be paying in life insurance in the long run. And then let's see what Dave has to say after that. Now, again, I think we need to go back to the chart, as we talked about earlier, and you probably already understood from what I said, is that you don't lose all the money. I think he's talking about whole life here, which is very, very different. Remember, we're talking about motorcycles versus cars versus buses. They all are different. They're all vehicles, but they're all very different. So I think the issue is he's talking about a whole life policy, but yet he's saying that that's how an IUL works, which is just not how it works. So if we look at this graph again, if you have $250,000 in cash value, you're not paying for $500,000 in life insurance, you're only paying for that difference of $250,000, which means that when you pass away, you're getting $250,000 in life insurance and you're getting $250,000 in cash value. So again, you can see the misunderstanding in the statements that he is saying. It's not that they're necessarily lies. They're true about some of the policies, but they're not true about other policies, and they're definitely not true about IULs. And the damage that this causes is it means that people are going to end up with a huge tax bill in retirement, which is kind of what we talked about. And so the question becomes, well, how much am I going to have to pay in retirement? And here's the scary part. We don't know. And if you look at what's going on now, we know that taxes are going to go up, and that would be a common consensus amongst most people. The challenge is how much, and therefore how much am I going to have to pay? So this is kind of like taking on a business partner, but yet you don't clearly define the terms. And when you're going to go sell the business, you're basically going to let that person decide how much of it they actually want. Now, in a business transaction, we would say that that is probably not a good idea and you need a better contract. However, that is what we are asking the American people, and this is what Dave is asking the American people to do, is just trust the government, let them take however much out of it as they want, and you'll just have to deal with the consequences. And I just disagree with that. And again, this becomes very nefarious because not only are you paying more in taxes, but because that income is coming in and you're paying taxes on it because it's tax deferred, you're taking income, paying taxes, it means your Social Security benefits are going to be punished as well. So it's a double penalty of ignorance instead of actually looking at what a life insurance policy can provide you. Now, when we go below that, the other challenge that's going to happen as well, if we look at the insurance policy, and one of the things that Dave was trying to say is that these are just so expensive. But again, that's entirely inaccurate and is a mischaracterization of IULs. In fact, the longer you keep your IUL, the lower the costs are. Now, where Dave is right in that is that the costs are higher in the beginning, but they're much, much lower in the end. And the longer you have it, the better. But let's say you're going to average about 1% in either of the policies. So the question then becomes, what am I getting for my 1%? If we look at an IUL, well, we're paying for the death benefit, and that can double as long-term care. 70% of our population are going to need long-term care in the future. However, less than 8% actually have done any planning for long-term care. So you are still going to get that back in the form of a death benefit or in the form of long-term care. But now let's look at your 401k, your 403b, your TSP. What do you get back for your 1% there? Well, literally nothing. You're just paying the fee. So whichever way you want to go is really up to you. I just think that when you look at the numbers, it will make sense to pay for something and actually get something in return versus just paying for a fee. But again, the decision is always up to you. And if there's anything else that I can help with, down below there's a link where you can schedule a call for us together, and I will even send you some resources on my own dime to help you become more financially literate. Before you go, don't forget to smash the like button, hit the subscribe and the bell, and don't forget to leave a comment as well. And if I can ask you for a quick favor, I would love to know, and I would love some other videos. So who do you think is the most egregious when it comes to talking about IULs that you know of on YouTube? And can you maybe attach a link down below, because I would love to see what they have to say, and I would love to go through and debunk whatever is false in their videos about the IUL and their misunderstanding about it. And as always, I hope this was helpful for you, and you have a great day. I will catch you later. Bye.